Failure destroys most people long before success ever has a chance to save them. Not because failure is rare, but because most people secretly tie their identity to winning. The moment they fail, they begin questioning everything: their intelligence, their future, their worth, their purpose. One rejection suddenly feels like proof they are not good enough. One mistake becomes a permanent scar in their mind. One bad season convinces them their life is falling apart. And slowly, something dangerous happens. They stop trying. But nearly 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor discovered a completely different way to face failure. A way so powerful that it allowed him to survive betrayal, war, death, humiliation, pressure, and constant uncertainty without mentally collapsing. His name was Marcus Aurelius. And what he understood about failure might completely change the way you see your own struggles forever. Because according to Stoicism, failure is not the thing destroying you. Your reaction to failure is. And once you understand that deeply, you stop fearing failure the same way most people do. Marcus Aurelius lived during one of the hardest periods in Roman history. People today imagine emperors living peaceful, luxurious lives surrounded by comfort. But the truth is much darker. Rome was under constant pressure. War threatened the empire. Disease spread everywhere. Political enemies waited for weakness. Millions of lives depended on his decisions every single day. Imagine carrying that kind of responsibility. One wrong decision could destroy entire cities. One military failure could collapse years of stability. One emotional reaction could create chaos across an empire. And yet, despite all that pressure, Marcus Aurelius remained remarkably calm. Not because he never failed, but because Stoicism taught him how to survive failure without becoming broken by it. That is the difference. Most people think strong individuals avoid failure. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Strong individuals learn how to face failure correctly. And honestly, modern society is terrible at this. People are taught to worship success. Winning becomes everything. Looking successful becomes everything. Appearing confident becomes everything. But nobody teaches people what to do when life punches them in the face. Nobody teaches them how to emotionally survive losing. And eventually, life humbles everybody. No exceptions. Relationships fail. Dreams collapse. Plans fall apart. People disappoint you. Hard work sometimes leads nowhere. And when that happens, most people panic because they built their identity around outcomes. Marcus Aurelius believed this was incredibly dangerous. Because the moment your happiness depends entirely on external success, your peace becomes fragile. Think about how many people are mentally destroyed by things outside their control. A business fails, and they lose belief in themselves completely. Someone rejects them, and suddenly they feel worthless. One public embarrassment becomes something they replay in their mind for years. Their suffering becomes far bigger than the actual event itself. The Stoics believed human beings often suffer more in imagination than in reality. And failure is one of the clearest examples of this, because failure itself is temporary, but the meaning people attach to failure can destroy them permanently. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. That is why he constantly reminded himself not to become emotionally controlled by external events, because he knew something most people never realize. Failure is unavoidable. But becoming destroyed by failure is optional. That idea alone can transform someone's life. Imagine waking up tomorrow without fearing mistakes the same way anymore. Imagine attempting difficult things without constantly needing guaranteed success. Imagine being rejected, failing, falling behind, and still remaining emotionally stable. That kind of mindset changes everything. Because fear of failure silently controls millions of people. People stay trapped in jobs they hate because they fear failing somewhere else. They never start businesses because they fear embarrassment. They never chase big goals because they fear looking foolish. Most people are not imprisoned by failure itself. They are imprisoned by anticipation of failure. Marcus Aurelius would probably say something brutal about this. The person terrified of failure has already surrendered their freedom, because fear now controls their decisions. And Stoicism was built around reclaiming control from fear. Not eliminating fear completely, controlling it. That distinction matters. Marcus Aurelius was not fearless. No human being truly is, but he trained himself not to obey fear automatically. Modern culture misunderstands strength badly. People think confidence means never doubting yourself. Stoicism teaches something far deeper. Real confidence is acting correctly even while doubt exists. That is why the Stoics focus so heavily on discipline instead of emotion, because emotions change constantly. One day you feel motivated, the next day you feel exhausted. One moment you feel hopeful, the next moment life humbles you again. If your actions depend entirely on emotion, consistency becomes impossible. Marcus Aurelius understood this during war especially. Imagine standing before soldiers while uncertainty surrounds everything. Fear spreading through camps, death becoming normal, entire futures depending on decisions made under pressure. That environment forces a person to understand something quickly. Emotions alone cannot guide you through chaos, and failure becomes far less terrifying when you stop expecting life to always feel comfortable. This is where Stoicism becomes powerful. The Stoics believed hardship was part of human existence, not an interruption of life, part of life itself. That means failure was never viewed as proof you were cursed, unlucky, or worthless. Failure was viewed as training. And honestly, this mindset is extremely rare today. Most people interpret failure emotionally instead of intelligently. They fail once and immediately begin attacking themselves internally. I am not smart enough. I always ruin things. Maybe I am just not meant for greatness. And over time, these thoughts become identity. Marcus Aurelius believed this was one of the most dangerous things a person could do, because the mind eventually believes what you repeatedly tell it. That is why Stoicism constantly emphasizes awareness of thoughts. Not every thought deserves trust, especially during painful moments. Failure distorts perspective. It makes temporary situations feel permanent. It makes obstacles feel endless. It makes emotional pain feel eternal. But Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that human beings are stronger than they think, and history proves this repeatedly. Some of the strongest people alive today were once humiliated, rejected, ignored, broke, or completely lost. Failure often becomes the event that reshapes a person entirely, but only if they survive it correctly. That is the key. Two people can experience the exact same failure and become completely different afterward. One becomes bitter, the other becomes wiser. One quits permanently, the other adapts and returns stronger. Same pain, different response. And according to Stoicism, the response is everything. Marcus Aurelius believed human beings waste enormous energy fighting reality, complaining, resisting, asking why life is unfair. But reality does not change because we dislike it. Failure already happened. Now the real question begins. What will you become because of it? That question separates weak minds from strong ones. Weak minds ask, why did this happen to me? Strong minds ask, what can this teach me? That shift changes everything psychologically, because now failure becomes useful instead of meaningless. Imagine how dangerous that mindset becomes. A person who learns from pain instead of collapsing because of it becomes extremely difficult to destroy. And honestly, many people never reach their potential because they quit during the painful middle part of growth. They want immediate results, immediate success, immediate certainty. But Stoicism teaches patience with the process. Marcus Aurelius understood that nature itself works slowly. Trees do not grow overnight. Empires are not built instantly. Character is not formed comfortably. And maybe that is the real tragedy of modern culture. People want the rewards of greatness without enduring the suffering required for greatness. They admire disciplined people while avoiding discipline, admire confidence while avoiding discomfort, admire success while avoiding failure. But failure is often the entrance fee to growth. Every strong person eventually learns this. The athlete loses before winning. The entrepreneur struggles before succeeding. The artist creates terrible work before mastery appears. Nobody escapes the process. Marcus Aurelius believed accepting this reality creates peace, not because failure suddenly feels pleasant, but because you stop viewing failure as evidence that you should give up. And this is where Stoicism becomes deeply practical. When failure happens, the Stoics focused on one thing above all else: what remains under your control. Not public opinion, not outcomes already past, not the past itself. Your response, your mindset, your discipline, your next action. That focus protects the mind from unnecessary suffering, Because many people fail once, then emotionally fail a second time afterward. The event hurts them once. Their own thinking hurts them 100 more times. Marcus Aurelius refused to live that way. He believed pain was natural, but emotional self-destruction was often self-created. And maybe that is why Stoicism still matters today, because modern life constantly pressures people to measure themselves through achievement, followers, money, status, recognition. And when those things disappear, identity collapses too. But Stoicism builds identity differently, not through external success, through internal character. That means even during failure, dignity remains possible, discipline remains possible, self-respect remains possible, growth remains possible. And honestly, this may be one of the most powerful psychological shifts a person can make. To understand that failure does not reduce your human value. It simply reveals where growth is still needed. Marcus Aurelius himself made mistakes constantly. Every ruler does. Every human does. But his greatness came from reflection instead of ego. He examined himself honestly, learned continuously, adjusted constantly. That humility made him stronger. Weak people avoid confronting mistakes because their ego cannot tolerate discomfort. Strong people study their failures carefully because they value truth more than pride. And eventually, this creates wisdom. Not motivational wisdom, real wisdom, the kind only pain can teach. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone feels like their life is falling apart because of failure. Maybe they lost something important. Maybe they embarrassed themselves publicly. Maybe they worked hard for something that never happened. And secretly, they feel ashamed. Marcus Aurelius would probably tell that person something simple but powerful. Failure is not proof that your story is over. It is proof that your story is still being written. Because nobody becomes strong without resistance. Nobody develops resilience without suffering. Nobody gains wisdom without mistakes. That is the hidden cost of growth. And maybe the real reason failure feels so painful is because it attacks the ego. It destroys the illusion of control. It exposes weaknesses. It humbles ambition. But humility is not always destruction. Sometimes humility is transformation. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. That is why he never viewed obstacles as enemies automatically. Sometimes obstacles reveal the exact lessons comfort never could. Patience, discipline, mental toughness, self-awareness, traits impossible to fully develop during easy seasons. And maybe that is why some people emerge from failure stronger than ever before, because suffering forced them to become someone new. At the end of life, nobody escapes hardship completely. Failure touches everyone eventually, even emperors, even geniuses, even legends. The real difference is not who fails. The real difference is who continues growing afterward. That is the Stoic way. Not pretending pain does not exist, not magically avoiding difficulty, but facing failure without surrendering your mind to it. Because Marcus Aurelius believed a person becomes powerful the moment they stop fearing hardship so deeply. And maybe he was right, because once failure no longer controls your decisions, your life changes completely.